What's up, everybody? Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic, and over here to my right is Macho John Jammin Savage, replacing Jamming John. I don't know what happened to him.
Yeah!
Oh, no. Reasonably sure that Jammin John suffered some horrible fate in a truck stop, probably due to this gentleman.
Snap into a Slim Jim, bitch.
You smell like Marlboros.
Jeez.
Anyway, we have another album review for you, and one that... we wanted to go over because it kind of ties into two shows that we've recently been to. So we're going to go over the latest offering from Embryonic Autopsy, Orgies of the Deformed. Sounds fun, right? This also comes out on the 14th of June on Massacre Records. This band formed sometime before 2022 in Chicago. Again, the date of the origin of this band is murky, or at least not listed on the archives. This is their second full-length overall, and this is... kind of flat out death metal, and it has some interesting lines drawn to it. One of the first lines that at least draws us to this band is Denver Death Fest.
Correct. Yeah, we booked these guys on the first and I don't know, it seems like the only Denver Death Fest, but whatever. Yeah, we booked these guys and so we got to see them there, and that was cool.
And this band features current and former members of Oppressor, which Oppressor just reunited after, about a 25-year hiatus. We just saw them at MDF, and it was absolutely awesome to see them because Oppressor, at least for me, are probably like the first 10 death metal bands I think I ever got into in the 90s. Their albums Solstice of Oppression and Elements of Corrosion were like big ones for me, and after seeing them live there, and then they actually played the Toledo Death Fest as Embryonic Autopsy, not Oppressor, but they did sell me a cool Oppressor shirt. So
yes,
yeah, it was pretty cool. But Embryonic Autopsy also features members, at least of this live incarnation that we saw at MDF. And we were pretty stoked to go over this one, mainly because Oppressor absolutely kicked ass at MDF.
Yes, they did. And I hadn't heard too much Oppressor prior to that. And then having already seen Embryonic Autopsy once in Denver, and then again in Toledo, I was like, well, screw it, we should probably go over the album.
Now, in Embryonic Autopsy, the main focal member from Oppressor is vocalist Tim King. He did vocals and bass for Oppressor. He's one of the founding members. And I kind of just wanted to see what he's been doing because, again, Oppressor's been gone for so long. Or, well, rather not, because they're back now, but they were gone for so long. And this is my first time ever jamming a full album of theirs. I'd not heard the first one. And... I mean, again, it is straight up just kind of death metal that, I don't know, like, it's not brutal death metal, but it does have brutal death metal aspects, but it's also not like fully old school, like 90s death metal, even though I would say like a lot of the strong structure is very straightforward, kind of meat and potatoes. It kind of lurks somewhere in between. So, you know, think bands like Broken Hope, Baphomet, maybe Dehumanized, stuff like that.
And it's very speedy, too. So take elements of those bands that were mentioned and add about 100 BPM to each of the songs, and that's pretty much what you get out of this band.
Now, naturally, because I'm an Oppressor fan, you know, I have to kind of compare this band to Oppressor just a little bit, and they are different. Oppressor is noted for being, again, like a old school death metal band, but also like, you know, technical death metal. There was a lot of like really intricate riff playing here, and this kind of really dials that down. Vocally, it's similar, though I think Tim is going for more of a brutal death metal approach in here, and he's got some absolutely just gross sounding vocals, and they're hard to miss because they are probably the most out front thing in the mix of this album, and you hear it right away with the opening track, Dripping in the Vaginal Nectar. These song titles are going to be fun to say.
I love them. I love the song titles. They're pretty good. Yeah, the vocals are very out front, and so are the drums. Drums, again, are very blasty, very speedy. This guy's moving 3,000 miles an hour around most of his kit. Man, it's almost like brain drill speed and kind of decapitated speed. And it kind of stays in that lane, I'd say, 95% of the time in this record.
Riff-wise, I mean, this kind of runs the gamut of, like, tropes you'd hear in, like, 90s death metal. Lots of heavy, deep tremolos, big chuggy riffs occasionally. It kind of stays on the tremolos, I would say, for the most part. But when they decide to get chuggy, there's, like, some fierce Cannibal Corpse comparisons you can make. Songs like Carnivorous Abortion and Self-Inflicted C-Section, which instantly brought to mind that whole scene in Prometheus where she has to, like, cut out the thing from her gut. It was pretty cool. Not quite as cool as like the chest burster scene in Alien, but few things are. But,
that's fair.
Yeah. But those songs feature some like really nasty, chuggy, kind of vicious Cannibal Corpse style riffs. It adds a lot of like additional aggression because I feel like the tremolos kind of add more of like an atmosphere to the background. Like occasionally you get like some dissonant melodies that kind of pop up in the background to make it sound more evil and sinister. But I think the main gear of this album is brutality. Yeah. Just being flat out heavy and fast and aggressive. And then atmosphere and kind of any other like additional dynamic that works in death metal really kind of comes later.
Now we do get some guests on this album, and the guests I think appear more than just straightforward Embryonic Autopsy songs of just themselves. We get James Murphy on 3 tracks, and we all know Lord James Murphy. I won't even get into that. And then Terrence Hobbs from Suffocation, which I think was a good choice. And then a Mr. Jack Owen of Cannibal Corpse fame and 6 Feet Under, but we won't talk about that.
I'm so glad that Jack managed to get out of Barnes' grasp for a little bit, just to do something else.
Yeah, but the guests appear on, I'd say, like 8 songs out of 13, so yeah. And they were good choices, dude. James Murphy, of course, his leads sound like magic, and why would they not?
Honestly, they're some of the most like melodic and just epic sections of the songs that he's on. Orgies of the Inseminated features, I think, one of his most amazing leads, but Cleopatra Spawn, which is kind of an odd title considering every other title in here is pretty damn gross.
Yeah.
But he has an absolutely soaring, epic lead, loaded with like killer harmonies in it, and just tons of melody. Like he rolls. He's James Murphy. Just listen to, I don't know, literally anything he's on and you'll know what I'm talking about. But I think one of the big standouts was Carnivorous Abortion, actually featuring both James Murphy and Terrence Hobbs. And when I saw them listed, I figured, all right, we're going to get a solo from one and a solo from the other, and it'll be our job to kind of pick out which is doing which. Instead, you kind of get like a layered solo effect, which is really cool. And you get like some harmonies, which I assume is between those two. So, I mean, in my mind, a Terrence Hobbs, James Murphy harmony is something that I didn't know was on my death metal bingo card, or at least like one that I know I would never fill. But here we are, and honestly, it's like one of the coolest moments on this album. The song itself, I think, is like really savage, really aggressive. I really like the riffs on it, but that moment on there is just absolutely killer.
Yeah, that song is absolutely brutal, and I love it. But there's something glaring on this record that I think everyone will hear immediately. We were talking about the mix, of course, and about how the vocals are really out front and the drums are really out front, and that's true. The problem with that is the guitars are buried 85 to 90% of the time. In fact, the times when you can hear the guitars most is when they are in the guest sections of the album.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the case. And to be honest with you, if not for the low tremolo and the occasional lead, to me it would sound like a drummer and a vocalist playing together, because the bass is gone.
Yeah, the bass feels almost as though it is mixed out. Like at the end of The Conjoined Must Perish, really got it in for Conjoined Twins, there is a drum and bass section, and generally the drum and bass section, like that's the chance for like the rhythm section to shine. You can really hear both of them, and well, we can only really hear the drums. And when we did hear the bass, it is so low in the mix, like it is almost inaudible.
Yeah, and we were playing with the speaker cranked, and let me tell you, we have a fairly sizable speaker which we hear all these albums on. It was there, but it's not. In a majority of the record, it's there in the sense that you can hear some sort of like low end on everything, but nothing you can make out. And then there's the drums. First of all, he's a great drummer, and live too, like we've seen this guy drum his ass off, like great drummer. But the drums, I hate to make this comparison, but they sounded, well, mechanical. It sounded like an electronic kit, which I know it's probably not. Secondly, the kick drum and the snare drum sound wet.
Yeah, like someone like misted the back of the kick drum, and it's kind of got this like weird crack to it.
And for as high as those appear in the mix, wouldn't you want an actual real drum sound?
And it sounds like, you know, all the bass, all the low end is probably being occupied by the double bass because the double bass is going constantly.
Yeah.
But another issue with like the volume on the guitars is, you know, there are moments where you can really hear them, and that's generally when they are doing like, you know, like heavier chugs, like more of that like Cannibal Corpse style riffing. But the tone itself is very muddy. Like there's really not a lot of room for intricacy in the riffs with that tone. Like you just really can't make it out. And then not only are the vocals like super out front, I feel like Tim kind of sticks to one vocal style, even though he shows off that there's definitely more range in his delivery on this album. He kind of sticks with this very low, very gurgly, very just flat out gross, just brutal delivery. And it's savage. It's nasty sounding, but I feel like he kind of uses it like a one size fits all in terms of all the different elements that this band likes to play with. And where it would really work is probably in the groovier sections, especially like if they did like some syncopated slam riffs. He's got a voice that would layer on top of that perfectly.
100%.
But when they're doing like some of the faster, more intricate stuff, he doesn't really change his cadences very much. They kind of stay kind of in that same like, you know, 2 or 3 words, space, 2 or 3 words. And, you know, maybe if he kind of like sped up the vocal cadences, it would kind of break up the monotony of the delivery.
And the problem further with that is that sometimes the vocal cadences seem a bit off. In Dissolving in Acidic Afterbirth, towards the end of that, there's, I don't know what it is, because it's definitely not a breakdown section. There's just a section where he's trying to bark out this verse, and it doesn't feel like it's hitting quite correctly on the drum beat. And the worst one of all that is Cleopatra's Spawn. The verses on that, the drummer's doing some kind of like odd off-time groove, which would sound really cool, but where the vocals come in, it's at the wrong point in that groove, and it makes it sound like almost unlistenable. Like what the hell is happening here? Yeah,
I completely lost the rhythm there. And because not only do the vocals come in at an odd point, they're also a different style. They're like kind of more of a like whispered, very reverby, sinister sound. They do sound evil as hell, but the fact that there's so much reverb and like kind of a delay on them, it kind of overlaps with the rhythm. So you hear that echo and you're trying to follow the rhythm, and it gets very confusing. Now they do that pattern again, and it doesn't have that issue. So I feel like that was just like maybe that take. And it sucks because that song, I feel, is one of the more ambitious songs on here.
Correct.
There's definitely more dynamics going on. Like Tim is actually showing off some different vocal styles. Like there's some big, like more like roars on there. And it's kind of different sounding than his standard gurgle. And honestly, some of it is kind of more reminiscent of Oppressor. But one of my biggest issues with this album, and it probably has a lot to do with seeing Oppressor and being a big fan of them, and maybe getting my expectations a little too high in terms of a new project that, I mean, clearly I don't think they want to sound like Oppressor, which I don't blame them. But inevitably, I do end up comparing this to Oppressor. And the biggest issue for me is I feel as though Oppressor's music was more dynamic, you know, more flashy, you know, and just like more energy to it. Like this is definitely fast, this is definitely brutal, but it stays really rigidly in its lane. And I feel like some of these songs are like incomplete, like they're like kind of half ideas, like Human Vessel of Alien Hybrids. It does have some interesting ideas, like some doomy phaser effects on the guitars. Like it sounds a little bit more atmospheric and dark. It's a little bit more groovy, which, you know, this album could definitely use like a couple of like more groove-laden, chuggy songs. But the song just kind of cuts out when it's kind of just getting started.
Yeah, when it's ramping up and like you feel like you're gonna get, you know, a cool bridge or even a breakdown, it ends like abruptly. Like that song's only what, 2 minutes and some change? And then on Self-Inflicted C-Section, it's kind of the same problem. And that song actually had some real potential too, and then it also just ends. Like, and ends before it really goes anywhere.
And in terms of like the half-finished songs, I also feel like there are half-pursued ideas on here. Like when these songs actually get a little bit more dynamic, I feel like they don't explore that side. They kind of go back to that comfortable wheelhouse, you know, blasts, tremolos, brutal vocals. And I get it, like that's, you know, stuff you do in death metal, but I think there's like other ideas that just don't get pursued on here. And on the other side of that, I think there are ideas that may have just been I don't know, explore too much. Like, I don't get the last track being an outro, The Curse of Madame Pale. It sounds like the start of what could have been like a bigger, longer song.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just this brief instrumental. It's atmospheric, it's creepy, but I feel like it could have been used to kick off a longer, more dynamic song. Like, again, like kind of a half idea there.
And that brings about another question. The guitars on that song, even isolated, like you can hear everything. You can even hear the bass a little bit there, but the guitars sound the best that they do in the entire record. So my question is, why didn't the rest of the album sound like that?
Yeah, I don't get this mix. And I mean, honestly, there's part of me that, you know, if this was remixed and remastered, like it would probably sound a lot better. But there are still some elements that are just sort of out of place on here, like additional vocal effects that I feel are unnecessary, or just like vocal ideas that could have been explored. Like there's some good high screams on here. Again, like some more creepy whispered vocals, some roars, but he kind of stays at one setting. But if this was given like, I don't know, like a classic kind of like Scott Burns sort of makeover, you kind of make it sound like more organic, beef up the guitars, change around the drum sound. Maybe these songs would stand out a little bit more, but I mean, when it comes down to songwriting, nothing really jumps out at you. Like there's maybe 2 or 3 songs in here that would say like, all right, they're decent, but I think the only reason they stand out is because they stand out against other songs in this album that just kind of don't. And what sucks is we actually met these guys, and I feel bad that I'm like kind of like low-key dogging on their band, and I thought they put on a good live performance, and they're super cool people. And you know, again, this might also have a lot to do with me seeing Oppressor before this.
But I mean, then again, 3 members in Oppressor, at least in the incarnation that we saw them at MDF, are also in Embryonic Autopsy. So I mean, it's not like you're completely, you know, shitting on everybody here.
Yeah. You guys did great in Oppressor. I absolutely loved it. And live, you guys did well with, you know, this band. But overall, I gotta give this 2 stars. Like, this is not great. Like, it's not the worst thing I've ever heard. There's definitely far worse things, but this is, I don't know, kind of lackluster. Musically, there's definitely some stuff that, again, I think is pretty decent, but as an album, as a whole, I feel like, again, there's like a lot of stuff that gets cut off short, a lot of ideas that aren't fully explored, and with this mix, it makes it really difficult to listen to. Like, you know, the guitars being so back in the mix and the vocals and drums being so out front, they're kind of occupying a space where the guitars should be just kind of running shit. Mm-hmm. And for the love of God, turn up the bass a little bit too. But yeah, like the mix on this really hurts this. And, you know, maybe remixed and remastered, this would probably sound a lot better, but I still think there's some stuff that, you know, kind of needs to be retooled on here. Vocally, I think Tim King's got a just massive, gross growl. But I think there's other vocal things that he could be doing, and he does tease those on here, which was kind of confusing for me because there were moments there like, yeah, that vocal approach probably would have worked in this spot. And maybe just like speed up some vocals a little bit on faster sections, or throw in some more like brutal slams for those absolutely gross vocals. But yeah, this is not like the best, but again, it's not the worst. Again, if you're a fan of, I would say like, you know, Broken Oak is very comparable. I mean, they're Chicago, you know, compatriots as well. Dehumanized, Baphomet, a little bit of Suffocation, Decapitated, stuff like that. I still urge you to check it out, form your own opinions. Who knows, you might absolutely love this album, but for me, it was just kind of meh.
I'm going to go ahead and give this 1.5 stars. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's mostly because of the mix. Even the world's best, most technical, proficient, performing, awesome band, if you give them a crappy mix, it's going to harm, you know, what you, the listener, decide about the record. Like, I've seen these guys play. Actually, I've seen them in now multiple bands play, and I know that they're all extremely talented. I just feel like a lot of this, although it's blasty and fast and heavy, it's just kind of by the numbers. Like, there wasn't anything really that jumped out at me aside from the guest musicians that absolutely destroyed. I mean, James Murphy, you got James Murphy, you got Terrence Hobbs, you got Jack Owen, you got some power hitters here. But overall, I just thought like the inability to hear a lot of what was happening really just kind of tanked a majority of this record for me. You shouldn't have to really, stick your ear up close to the speaker to hear what's going on for an album. And really, I mean, that's a majority of what killed it, because there probably is some really cool riffing in here. I'm a sucker for really low end tremolo, and this has a bunch of it. Like it sounds evil, but it sounds like far off, distant away evil. Like, ooh, look over there, there's a scary monster, but it's all the way over there, so it can't harm me, I'm good. That is pretty much how I look at this. But nonetheless, I mean, it was decent. Again, I've seen these guys live, so I know what this sounds like. And it just sounded like kind of poo on this record. So it's 1.5 stars for me. Again, mostly because of the mix. But like we said, form your own opinion. Take a listen to it for yourself. Maybe we're just old and have damaged hearing. Maybe it really did sound like magic. Anyway, form your own opinions. Listen to it for yourself. You might enjoy it. There are some definite Cannibal Corpse moments in here. There are some definite Decapitated moments in here. Yeah, check this record out. It just wasn't for me.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below, thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on the channel, up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
Once again, a bunch of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal, because what else are we going to do with our time? We got album reviews coming, because we're only in the middle of the year, so there's still 6 months more worth of awesome music coming your way. We've got discography rankings. We're going to rank Meshuggah here. It is happening. We got to get 5 dudes with varying lives and families and whatnot all on the same page, but we've figured out a date, so we're going to do that really soon. Expect to see that. Of course, States of Metal. Is it metal? Is it not metal? You're going to see more out of me, because I finally have internet in my apartment, so fuck yeah. But really, we do this all for you guys. We genuinely appreciate our family and our friends, and of course all of our fans, our subscribers, everybody that keeps Thralls of Metal moving. Thank you to all of you. Nick?
That's bigger than Macho Man's oiled up muscles, which Jammin John does not have. Those are on layaway.
I don't have. They're coming. They're coming in the mail.
Amazon.
I had to order them from overseas, and they got the visas and all sorts of shit. They're coming though.
Yeah,
they're here. I mean, there's
a lot of paperwork.
There's some muscle here. It's just not what you would consider, actual muscle. It's more of a
decorative.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, you guys are absolutely awesome, and of course, more content coming your way. So one more big thank you, because you guys are awesome, and we will catch you later.